about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
Watch the Vampire and Devil podcast. They have such sights to show you.
The Vampire and Devil Show, they don't clown around.
Ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps, welcome back to an all-new episode of Vampire and Devil Podcast. We appreciate all of you awesome, creepy, scary people tuning in to last episode. It's been doing great so far, and we really appreciate your continued support with it. It's been absolutely exciting. It's been a total rave to the grave, so we really appreciate you guys for that. But we're going to get into what we have talking about now. We got a couple of reviews to talk about, don't we, Devil? And it looks like we're going to start off with Candyman.
With a Candyman.
Most recently, the 2021 version.
Oh yeah, we did a little poll for that one about what movie should we do to celebrate Black History Month and movies that were directed by African Americans, and the Candyman won by probably a landslide. I think I don't think anything was even close to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll admit when it blew up as quick as it did when it came to the voting, there was a little part of me that thinks that people just ended at the words Candyman before you get to the 2021 part. Not that that's a bad thing, because personally I thought the requel, the reimagining sequel that happened, I personally thought was very cool and very good anyway. But I did get a little bit of a chuckle thinking that people simply saw Candyman and you're automatically going to think Tony Todd and be like, oh, of course that's my vote.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. But I was like, you know what? No, we're gonna throw a little trick in there and do the 2021. Like you said, it's a requel. It's a direct sequel to the original Candyman.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I mean, it was a cool one. I mean, there was a lot of like uniqueness to it. It was directed by Nia DaCosta, but Jordan Peele was one of the co-producers.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy though. Like, I mean, it had its, as far as like remakes and requels and all that stuff like that. A lot of horror fans liked it. A lot of horror fans didn't like it. A lot of the people that didn't like it, the complaints were because of the whole, unrest of like, African Americans being killed by police officers, and that new whole, not that it's new, but like the whole like woke thing about that. They were like, this movie shouldn't be about this kind of stuff. But then the original movie, and even in this movie, it talks about that's the whole reason for Candyman. Candyman is about civil unrest, and that's the reason why Candyman exists, is because they just want to destroy everything that these individuals have done just because of the color of their skin. And like people were bitching and complaining about it, and I'm like, well, that's what the original was. Yeah. And that's what this one's about. This one kind of dives a little bit deeper into that, but it's still the base of each movie, and every Candyman movie has been the injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because basically the Cliff Notes version of it is a black man having a relationship with a white woman that gets found out about, and they kill him over it. Like, that's exactly what the original Candyman was based off of. it's exactly what 2021's version was based off of as a direct sequel. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, look, you can get, upset about not maybe liking that premise, but that doesn't change the fact that they're actually sticking by the book when it came to what the movie was originally designed to talk about. And if it's uncomfortable, if it's unsettling, well, honestly, perhaps that's a good thing. That's kind of what the genre is about. It's about testing the boundaries and, to a certain degree, going different directions or kind of getting a little bit more intimate on certain things. It's actually kind of funny because, as sort of a little side note real quick, the thing that I find kind of interesting when I was hearing that argument is there are, in my opinion, ideas of it being done incorrectly when you're trying to go there. And it's very common knowledge to people in our circles that I am not a big fan of the Spiral movie that came out a few years ago. Huge fan of Saw. Billy's tattooed on my arm. Love the Saw series. Don't like the Spiral movie. It actually has nothing to do with the cast. I think Samuel's great. I think Chris Rock's fantastic. I like the idea of the movie. But to do this movie, Spiral, from the book of Saw, if you've watched Saw and if you've watched Spiral from the book of Saw, they didn't even read the book. It's not even from the book. Because the basic, simplest preference, like, of the way it was put together. The simplest basic design of the way Saw was done was that John Kramer's character basically is pushed too far by the evil of the world and those people not being punished for their sins, transgressions, and basically living off the sacrifices and the blood of good people. Now, in Spiral, in my opinion, they really dive deeply into it as a cop-killing movie based around the way a son feels his father's death was directly caused, basically. And that was his means for revenge, was he felt that his father's death was wrong, and so he just went out to just kill these people because of the bitter grapes or the sour grapes that he felt. Which I don't agree with. If you're trying to keep it in conjunction with the way a movie or a series is done, that's not the way to do it. But, so we don't get off track, bringing it back to Candyman, yeah, it's that exact same thing. It's, the bottom line is social unrest, the injustices of whether you do or don't agree with an interracial relationship is what the whole movie and series was based off of. So if people don't like it, unfortunately, that's on them.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, I mean, I thought it was well written. I thought it was beautifully directed. I like the fact that they kind of went back into that Chicago, Cabrini area, of the inner city and stuff like that. They brought it in. They made it a little bit more modern. I mean, it's it's about an artist, but then again, the original Candyman, like you were saying, he was sanctioned to do an art piece for a white family. So I mean, that movie's always been based in the art scene. And then you have, the fact that, all these actors that have been in it, the guy who played the Candyman guy, the Anthony guy, was amazing. He played an awesome role. The fact that he kept on going back and forth and going in and out of craziness and stuff like that. Yep. And then the fact of the matter is, well, if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, that the boy in the movie who Anthony plays is actually the kid in the beginning of the original movie at the end that basically almost got killed by the Candyman. So it kind of that's what brings this movie and the original movie back into the beginning and back into where they combine both those movies together.
We're going bananas over this Vampire and Devil podcast.
But I also what I also really liked about it as well is I'm a big fan, and again, since we mentioned Saw, that's one of the things that personally kept me very invested in the whole series. Was every movie they did of Saw gave me more backstory into John's character. So keeping it with the Candyman, that was the thing I actually really liked about this version of the Candyman, was they totally did a really cool job in the original Candyman with backstory, but they really got deep into the backstory when it came to this movie, this
Oh,
version.
Oh yeah, yeah. It goes into like, they mentioned the Tony Todd Candyman. They mentioned the Candyman that's in the beginning of the movie, but they also talk about different people who have been killed injusticeably and have done Candyman throughout the whole time. So you had this little lineage of like all the injustice that have done and all the times where the world needed someone like a Candyman to shake up society and shake up the grounds of the world to try to break and try to make all these rights and wrongs kind of have some meaning and have some consequences.
Yeah, 100%. And it started off with just kind of unique little things to for the purpose of the movie, where the overall concept behind summoning the Candyman is saying Candyman into a mirror 5 times. Well, the movie hasn't even started yet, and you got a reference to a mirror right away.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, the way you were talking about that, I thought that was like the coolest part of the whole entire movie. Like you haven't even started the movie yet. Literally, the logos come out, and you have the Paramount logo, and it's mirrored. You have all the companies that produced the movie and made the movie all mirrored, and it was such a cool idea because I forgot all about it, and
Yeah.
I'm watching this, and I'm like, wait, is this backwards? Like, did somebody put this in the wrong way or something like that? And then you're like, oh, never mind, because it's about the whole mirror of that, and that's a part of the movie that's sort of a basis on is like the mirror's perception of what thing is. Some people think that you know this movie is about this or about that and about that, but it's all about like how you feel and are you willing enough to look yourself in the mirror and summon sort of your fears, because Candyman kind of like brings out those fears.
Right. And it was like interesting because I remember seeing it in the theater, yeah, and wondering if like the reel or something had been put in backwards at
Yeah.
first. And then when the movie started in proper direction, I was like, oh, that's clever. I really like that. I thought that was very, very cool. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of like new age and modern day relevancy when it comes to a lot of things. So what do we think about the modern take on it, since it is supposed to be a direct sequel, but it takes place, 30 years later,
Yeah.
from the original Candyman? What do we think about the way it was done with not so much modern technology with the way you make a movie now, but modern day gadgets and just the way that it is right now, whether it's the use of iPhones or this, that, or the other thing in the movie?
Oh yeah, yeah. I thought it did really well. You know what I mean? It kind of makes it, um, I guess, easier for Candyman to kill
Mhm.
nowadays, because back then it was all you brought him out and it was all word of mouth. It was
Yeah.
all like by like just people knowing it. But then all of a sudden you see this, like in this movie, you see a viral thing on YouTube or something like that, and it shows about this Candyman thing. Now you have people that aren't even from the area that are all of a sudden like daring each other to like say Candyman in the mirror. There's like those schoolgirls that do it in the movie and stuff like that. So it's kind of like in this movie, and especially like with the ending, and with Anthony becoming the Candyman. I mean, if they really wanted to, they can continue on with it, because nowadays the story of Candyman, like you said, with social media, would ravage this whole country in a matter of minutes versus keeping it based to just Chicago area.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, that's actually an interesting scene too that you brought up, where you've got basically like the 4 or 5 whatever cheerleaders kind of poking fun at the legend and kind of daring each other to test the waters, which they do, and it goes badly. So I have an interesting question for you, and I'll give my thoughts on it too, because it made me chuckle in the theaters when I noticed it. But it's an interesting part of modern times right now. Of It used to be called back in the day product placement, and there's still product placement that still gets used to this day, as far as a general term. So if you noticed, when the little girl's hiding in the stall, her backpack is hanging from the hook that they have on the back of the stalls. And one of the buttons or patches on her backpack happens to be a BLM patch.
Yeah.
What do we think about something like that? Because there's a lot of back and forth on, I don't think there's any debate on the value of life for all races and the value and the fact that Black lives do matter. I don't think there's any debate on that. But of course, there is debate on whether or not the actual group behind BLM are doing good or doing bad. That's just kind of for whoever different. That just kind of is based off of how people see it per their own lives and how it may or may not affect. But what's your take on the product placement in a major motion picture like that?
I mean, to me, honestly, I don't have a problem with it, especially because if you're trying to make it modern and make it within the, because like I said, they don't really tell you what year it is in this movie, but you can tell that it's made, in that time. So, I mean, that is a good way to kind of say, okay, we're in the, 2020 times now. And, by having that little nod of Black Lives Matter pin on there. I mean, like I said, and the fact that this movie is, like I said, written by an African American. It was produced by African Americans. She was the first Black woman to ever win an Oscar.
Yeah.
Director, and the cast predominantly African American. A lot of like that. So like it makes sense because to them, you know that Black Lives Matter isn't just a quote unquote quote.
Yeah.
That's their lives,
Right.
what I mean? So it's like whether or not you're on the spectrum of, what you think of that or what you don't think of that, it doesn't defer the fact that, they have a voice and Nia has a voice and she's like, I'm going to use it to talk about it, especially because, like I said, this movie is about injustice and civil unrest. So it's like, why wouldn't you have that in there? I mean, it would make sense to have it in there versus not having it in it. I mean, I'm sure she probably consciously put that
Oh,
pin
sure.
on there and made it so that it was noticeable. But then again, I mean, it could have. Who knows? It could have been that actress just happened to have a book bag that happened to have a pin on it, and it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it could be either or.
For sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the fact of the matter is, they're not seeing it as a movement per se by the definition of movement. It's their lives and how people feel about their value, their appreciation when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I found it to be very slick. I noticed it right away when I saw it back in the theaters. I was like, that was clever. That was interesting. That's unique. I like that. So I found that to be a very cheeky thing to slide in for sure. But we wouldn't be doing the review justice if we didn't cover that as well.
Oh yeah.
Now, getting back to the movie, as it plays out for this movie, it's got a relatively high kill count. It's got 16 kills in that movie. Starts off with the actual death of Sherman back in early times, leading up to the current premise of the movie.
Oh yeah. And the kills were all really cool kills. I mean, especially because the way modern technology is now, you can make it where Candyman is killing somebody and you don't really see him. The only way you can see him or other people can see him is through a mirror. And like you were saying with the girl who was in the bathroom, she was seeing her friends be killed by just a little small compact mirror. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool concept where it's like, I mean, they're being killed by basically like a ghost almost, or
Yeah.
an entity, and like you said, and then like yeah, it had some really cool kills. I mean, it had the makeup on Anthony's hand as he got stung by the bee and progressively becomes more and more Candyman. And then whenever he takes off his shirt and his half of his body is like got the hives and stuff, it was pretty gnarly looking. He kind of and then the dude cuts off his arm to put the hook in it. It's
Yeah.
like it was pretty like we like you had to wince for a little bit. You're like, ooh, it's a little graphic, but like I said, it's cool to like kind of like this movie's got a little bit of both. It's got the practical effects, and then it's got a lot of the digital effects too. So it's like the kind of mesh of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. What do we think? Because it's not just the Candyman series where that has a prominent, effect and definition as to why the certain accusations were also made, but it's also been touched on in other movies like the Trick or Treat series with Sam and stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about this, harmful things in candy area.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I mean, that's pretty much what the premise of the beginning of this movie was, that there was this guy that was going around giving candy, and apparently one of them had a razor blade in it and stuff like that. So it kind of brought back that little folklore of like watching what you eat kind of thing, or taking candy from strangers and stuff like that.
Right. No, for sure, because we have that idea as well, where it's like, did this really happen? Is accusations being made? I love the taking candy from strangers thing. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And it definitely is that idea of can't. I think it also involves the idea of just personal thoughts, vendettas, or just being unsure or unknowledgeable of a person, where a person could just simply be trying to be nice, giving out candy to children, but something bad happens in there, and all of a sudden it's the slings and arrows. It's very Salem witch trials ish, where it's like, we need to make an example of, or we're just going to point at this person because we say they did this, regardless of whether or not it happened or whether or not they're innocent until proven guilty.
Oh yeah. It's a lot of that, and that's what it is. Like in the beginning with the Sherman character, the cops just basically come in and just start shooting right away, like
Yeah,
without any knowledge or whatever like that, which makes a profound thing because the kid who sees it, you find out later on, is the guy who's helping out Anthony become the Candyman and trying to bring back that. So like even though because I think he felt like he had some kind of guilt because he was down there, saw Sherman, screamed, and then that's when the cops knew to come in. And then when the cops came in, they had no idea where he was. But then they saw the kid coming up and had a candy in his hand. They're like, "Oh, he's down here." And then that's when you hear all the guns going off, and they basically waste Sherman right away.
yeah. So I got one other interesting point that I think would be an interesting thing to talk about. What do we think about the idea of a person's past and their obligation to continue it forward? When you learn about this injustice happening to whether it be a member of your family or whether it just be a member of like your just overall heritage or race, what do we think about a person's feeling or their thoughts of an obligation to carry it forward as opposed to just letting sleeping dogs lie?
Yeah. That's kind of like a sort of a warning in this movie too, because it's like, do you let something happen or do you not let something happen? Do you say something or do you not say something? And it's like, I guess there's consequences on both sides. If you don't say something, are you gaslighting it? Or if you do say something, are you responsible for what happens afterwards? Because a part of that, because within this Candyman movie, that the perfect example of that is at the end of the movie. All of a sudden, the cops come, shoot Anthony, the Candyman at that time, without any provocation whatsoever, and then take his girlfriend to the cop car and says, "Okay, this is going two ways. Either we're gonna say that he killed all these people and he was coming at us and we shot him in self-defense, or we're gonna say you're an accomplice, you helped him kill all these people, and we're gonna put you in prison for the rest of your life."
Yeah.
And that's when she makes that decision real quick, and she's like, "Okay, this is exactly what that Candyman lore and what they need is. This cop here is just trying to get away with killing another black youth.
Yes.
He's just trying to get away with it." And then that's when she asks, "Hey, can I see the mirror real quick? I just need to look at myself real quick." And she says Candyman, and all those cops get what they deserve. And then
Yep.
she realizes that maybe Candyman is something that we kind of need for. But then again, it's like, it's one of those movies where it's, you can weigh both sides. It's kind of like, like the mob vengeance versus not mob vengeance, or like, do you say something or not say something? Do you let it go or do you not let it go? It's I mean, both choices are gonna have bad and good consequences.
No, definitely. And so here's an interesting thing that a question I want to kind of pose to you, but also want to pose to our fans as well as something to think about that I'm starting to notice is kind of a potential, not necessarily trend, but a unique series of scenes that have been shot in recent horror movies. And that's the bulk of police officers that were killed in Candyman. And then right around honestly that same year, because I need to remember exactly when that movie came out, but I believe it was either 2020 or probably 2021, I believe, when that one came out. But in Halloween Ends, a whole bunch of first respond firemen were taken out in bulk by Michael Myers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting thing in current modern day horror. And it also seems to be a very interesting take on remakes or reimaginings of outstanding current series that have length to them, of first responders / authority figures being taken out in bulk. We've got Michael Myers taking out an entire fire station that I do know did rattle, the common person, and there were debates on whether or not that was proper or not. And again, you've got in Candyman, where the Candyman takes out an entire slew of police officers, and there's even debate on whether or not that, is in bad taste. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I wanted to kind of put out there for not only our conversation, but even just as something for our fans to kind of mull around a little bit on just what they think about something like that. Personally, I don't look too deep into it because it's kind of the overall premise and design of storytelling. Michael Myers is more or less protecting his turf with all these people that are around his home. Candyman is standing up for himself as opposed to standing his ground on crimes he didn't commit, to people claiming that this is something that he did. And again, it's not the only two examples of that. You can find examples of stuff like that in easily the last 30 plus years of movies, depending on what you look. But I just found that to be a very interesting, situation to again put on film, where it's just a couple of movies with very close release dates, taking out what a lot of people would feel is protected positions.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's especially with the Halloween one. There was definitely, like you said, there was people on both sides. It's funny though. I thought people were like oh, people are like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, well, I mean, if a house is on fire and you have a killer who doesn't give a fuck who he's killing,
Yeah.
and firefighters come, they're gonna get killed.
Mhm.
If a bunch of paramedics come to that house, they were gonna get killed. If a school bus of little kids come to that house, they were gonna get killed.
Yeah.
I'm like, it had nothing to do with they were being firefighters. At least in the Halloween one, the
Yeah.
Candyman one, it was it's deliberate because the cops got what they deserved. If
Yeah.
they weren't shitty cops to begin with, they probably wouldn't have gotten killed that way. Where in this movie, it was just a wrong place, wrong time.
Right.
Because even in that movie, when the firefighters come, because I think it's the second Halloween, because it's right after the first one, and then the
Yeah, it's
first one,
Halloween Kills.
yeah, they're going, and all of a sudden Jamie Lee Curtis's character is like, no, let it burn, because one, she wants it to die, but two, it's like that's what's gonna happen. Michael Myers isn't gonna get killed, and he don't give a fuck if you're a paramedic, a cop, or a fireman. But I thought it was also funny too, because I knew a lot of fans that were first responders and firefighters that loved it and went to conventions where Courtney was at, the guy who played Michael Myers, and had them sign stuff, had them
Yeah.
sign like their firefighter gear.
Yeah. No, for
So
sure.
it's like these are, and the funny thing about it is most people who were probably complaining about this movie are like the Karens aren't even firefighters, and yet firefighters are like, hell no, man, that's freaking crazy. If I was gonna go out and be killed, that'd be kind of cool to get killed by Michael Myers versus like what does happen to firefighters and stuff like that in real life. So
Oh,
like I said, it was like a lot of the firefighters I knew, they were all gung ho about it. And I'm like, yeah, they're like, yep, they chose the wrong fire to go to.
exactly. And because that, and like I said, this isn't the first movie to deal with cops. This isn't the first movie to deal with firefighters. You've even got the Return of the Living Dead series, which is known for send more cops, send more paramedics,
Yeah.
just so they can feed.
Yeah. So it's been there all the time. It's just people want to complain about whatever, in this cancer culture, and he said this, said that, this kind of stuff. Yeah, this world, like, once it's a movie. It's not, it's not based in real life. Now, like I said, the Candyman one, a little bit more based in reality. That is a very common scene that happens in reality. In reality, houses that burn on fire don't have a maniac come out and start slaughtering all firefighters. As
Right.
far as I know, that has never happened. Not saying that firefighters haven't been killed by maniacs, but usually not when it comes to a house being on fire and him coming out and just killing everybody. The facts of that ever happening are probably slim to none. Versus bad cops killing an innocent black person, that happens a lot more than firefighters just being killed by a maniac.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right about that. And it's also just interesting in general too, because not only did we get the backstory of Anthony's character with playing the role of the little boy at the end of Candyman's, 1992, then being an adult for the telling of this story, you've got Vanessa Williams, who actually fully reprises her role from the original movie.
Yep. Yeah. That was cool about this movie too, is they did bring back a little bit of that. You had the area of Chicago where the movie was filmed. Like you said, you had Vanessa, who was the woman with the baby in the original Candyman, reprising her role as the mother of Anthony. You had Helen's voice a little bit in it throughout the movie from him listening to the tapes of her talking about Candyman. And then towards the end of the movie, when he get these whirlwind of bees and they keep showing you different Candymans throughout the eras, you get Tony Todd in there, who comes back and reprises his role once again as Candyman, which I think is like the fourth or fifth time he's been Candyman already.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, and that's a perfect bridge, because as like kind of a closing conversation before we rank is Tony Todd. So they did a very good job in the lead up to this movie, kind of keeping Tony Todd to a certain degree a secret. You and I actually had a very fun exchange with Tony in person, probably about a year before the movie came out. But it was they really were speaking pretty quietly about whether he was or was not going to be involved, which had a lot of people curious, and people still debate to this day, why wasn't Tony the Candyman for that movie? But the way that I kind of see it is it worked better with the younger actor morphing into what we now know to be Tony Todd's Candyman, as opposed to, no disrespect to Tony, it's just fact, this older guy playing Candyman the whole time, where this young man becomes Candyman, and then all of a sudden he's 50 years old.
Yeah.
As opposed to being his normal age at, 20 to 30 years old, depending on how they were looking to play it off. Because again, it's supposed to be a direct sequel, and that's a 30-year difference. So, he's a very, very, he's a toddler in the original movie, and now it's 30 years later. So, give or take maybe anywhere in the area of 29 to 33 years old. But for him to be of that certain age, but not automatically transition immediately into Tony Todd, have Tony Todd then take over the movie, which, yes, old school horror movie people like ourselves would be stoked to see Tony Todd now being the guy for the second half of the movie. I like the fact that they let the actor see the character through, and then at the very end threw in that little bit of morphing. Kind of reminded me of the Evil Dead movie they put out a few years ago, where there was no morphing, but just right when it came to the credits, you simply saw Bruce Campbell's face pop up onto the screen and say groovy. When it was clearly that for that particular movie, the heroine was now a female character.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the fact that they let the actor see his character all the way out to then have it morph in to the person that we know as the Candyman. So what did you take of it? What was your thoughts on Tony Todd basically not being in the movie till the end?
I'm getting revved up to watch the Vampire and Devil podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I liked the fact that they had this guy. Because you got to realize the story of Tony Todd's character of Candyman has already been told. That's what the first movie was all about. I mean, theoretically, that's what part 2 and 3 and all the other Candymans that don't exist in this world, but that we have seen. We've got enough of that Candyman. So I like the fact that they open it up with Sherman as a Candyman. And then sort of you have that, and then Anthony turning into it, and then you're gonna go through all this all this time of like morphing in from this Candyman to that Candyman, and it made sense to just have that little taste of Tony Todd, because you want to give a little bit of praise to the guy who is the original Candyman.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as like a final thought, just from me to you, do we want a second Candyman of this version? I personally don't. I like it as a standalone movie. I think it's strong. I think the ending is right where it needs to be, especially with the nod to Tony. And I think it works very well on the strength of a direct sequel and obviously not a clear ending, because of course you can carry on with various social injustices. But as far as a movie of its own and a continuation of the original, I really like it as a strong ending. So look, I like Jordan Peele a lot. I'm not going to say that I would hate or despise another one, but I personally, I don't need it. I don't feel like it's something I just am jonesing for. Can't wait for that next Candyman movie. I don't have it in me. I like it as a standalone. While I wouldn't go so far as to call it closure, because there is that opening, I would love to just see it just stop right there as a, hey, I wonder how leave it open to interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm up for another Candyman. I don't think it needs to be done anytime soon. I think, and if Hollywood wants to um, hire me as a writer for this movie, I think what you should do for this is you should, give it a few years, come back to that story again, and continue with the fact that way she's gonna if the way this the mother, or not the mother, the wife, the girlfriend is gonna continue the story, and how social media gets this and all of that, and kind of maybe make it where you see it years later and a lot of bad stuff has happened, and make like a little like montage of like Candyman's killing all over the world kind of thing, and kind of leading it into that where it's like because yeah, you gotta realize, man, if Candyman is taking out all the evil in the world and all the people who are doing bad injustice, whether it be for any kind of reason, not just for the whole African American community, for any community whatsoever, or anything, kind of like you can do it for the whole, you can do it for the trans community, you can do it
Yep.
for for women, and sex trafficking and stuff like that. So if you're kind of going out and killing anybody, the world's gonna be pretty much messed up. So I think it'd be cool to see the continuation of it. But like I said, I don't think it needs to be anytime soon. I mean, in my opinion, I don't think Tony Todd would need to be part of it,
Mhm.
because it wouldn't make sense if Tony would come back. I mean, as much as I love Tony as being Candyman, it wouldn't make sense, since now the new character Anthony now is the Candyman now. So it'd make more sense to have him in it. But yeah, I mean, do they need to make it? No. I mean, like you said, I agree with you too. I think it's a good movie by itself. But I'm up for the option of them continuing, as long as they're doing it to do it right, and not just doing it just to mark it off of Candyman movie.
No, for sure. I definitely think that's right on point, and I think that's a great way to leave it off on. So let's talk the obituaries. Let's talk our kills out of 10. Why don't you kick this one off, Devil? How do you rank this movie? What's your kills out of 10 for the obituaries for Candyman 2021?
I give it a really high one. I would probably give this like a good 8 out of 10, only because the fact that I did like it. It had what you wanted. It had a lot of good kills. It was bloody and it was gory. It did continue on. I like it better because it's not trying to remake it. It is a continuation of the original story. And I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was very well shot. I thought it was very well acted. I thought it had a lot of cool things, and it had a lot of, like I said, I mean, it does have a lot of that social media, social injustice kind of elements into it. But of course, any movie that deals with this kind of stuff nowadays is going to have a lot of that. So yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, as far as like requels and remakes, I think it's up there as one of the better ones that have come out within the last like 10 years. So I give it high. I give it 8 out of 10.
Honestly, I'm definitely with you on that one. We're in full agreement. It's definitely going to be an 8 out of 10 kills on the obituaries for this one. That's exactly the mark that I would give it. I can't mark it overly high personally, because that's just how I feel about anything that falls under the category of a remake or retelling, because it's not original. I don't knock points off out of spite. It's just my personal belief. And to be honest, slight frustrations with the current state of Hollywood when it comes to ideas and stuff like that. But just like you said, I thought the cinematography was fantastic. I thought the acting was excellent. I thought the bloodlust was there, but I liked the fact that also in keeping with the original Candymans, even the less than stellar flesh, and even the absolute train wreck that was Day of the Dead. I thought the bloodlust was proper. It gave you what it needed to get its point across. The fact that they didn't just chuck a bucket of blood onto the movie to cover up its weaknesses and things like that. I thought that Jordan's producing was solid. I thought Nia's directing was right on point. I think, it's great for the community when it comes to strengthening and also killing certain stereotypes that come along with the horror community and those type of movies. I just thought they definitely did great. And again, for nostalgia, I love the fact that they were able to squeeze Tony in. I just think it's fantastic and very, very solid. So yes, definitely in agreement with you. I think we're in agreement there. 8 out of 10 kills on the obituaries for Candyman 2021.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, and if you haven't checked it out, go and check it out. And if you have, maybe go see it again. Maybe you'll find things that you haven't seen. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen it again, and I caught little things and stuff like that that I didn't remember seeing before. So it's definitely a movie that's worth giving it another look again.
Absolutely. I'm definitely with you on that. But fans, thank you guys so much. All of our vampires, all of our Satanists, all of our evil, evil, evil people. Thank you as always for checking out this review. But we're not done yet. We're coming back at you in a little bit. We got some more to discuss. So we are definitely looking forward to breaking down our next movie. So we will be back very, very shortly after this slight break with a couple of little unique videos and a couple of skits. See you soon.
It's your boy the Devil here with another self-indulgence movie review. Just got done watching Devil in the Flesh starring Rose McGowan. This movie didn't have very much flesh and didn't have a devil. It was kind of disappointing. But yet, it is a good movie about how bitches can be crazy. Maybe you shouldn't mess with the wrong chick.
You should be watching the Vampire and Devil podcast, or we'll be haunting your dreams or your nightmares.
All right, welcome back, our ghouls and goblins, our spooks and creeps. Vampire and Devil are right back here with you. Hope you enjoyed everything we had to talk about Candyman, but we're going to move it right into our next review that we're going to talk about per your guys' votes before we switch over to some new fun things in the future. But we're going to start off the first letter of the alphabet with the letter A, and we are going to go with the 1970s for this. We decided that we're going to go with the Amityville Horror from
Good. My package from Amityville has arrived.
1979.
Yeah, man. Was a good year. Some will say, it's not 100% fact, but it's a possibility that the devil was born in 1979 myself. But some say I'm older than that. But some say that I was born in 79. That's what the government thinks I was born.
That's what the government thinks. It's all a matter of potentially when the fires were stoked.
But anyway, yes, yeah, we decided to do Amityville Horror, and it's a good movie. I liked it. It's I like it because it is based on truth, or at least it's somewhat of a true story. About a family moving into a house, and the house previously one of the kids that were growing there all of a sudden started hearing all these voices in his head, and he decided to go and shoot his mother and father and his 3 siblings. And and then they sold the house to this family, which was Lut's family.
Yep.
And they paid pretty cheap for it. I'm kind of surprised that, because most times I know legally they're supposed to tell you about these things. They actually knew in advance what happened in this house.
Yeah.
Most people probably wouldn't have bought it if they would have found out about it. So I kind of thought, to begin with, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I was like, why wouldn't they? I was like, maybe they didn't tell them. But I'm like, no, they told them. They knew what they were buying into it. But it's a really cool house. It actually is in New York, in Amityville. The house is still up. The only thing that I did read about the house is they changed the eyes on the back of the house. That was kind of cool looking. That was like such a cool looking house. Like, even if nothing happened in that house, that's a perfect house to have for a horror movie, because it's so eerie looking.
Yeah, it was. I had read about that too, because not only besides watching the movie, I also did just some general back reading just about the murders, about the subsequent book, the subsequent movie, and also just the subsequent various sellings to different owners and stuff like that, and how much they paid back then versus what those numbers would be like now. And some of those numbers are actually really, really crazy when you just think about it in retrospect.
Yeah.
But yeah, they the house has been modernized. So it's kind of that for that not only that combination of just modern renovations, but mixed with a little bit of amenity because
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, you and I know this, Devil, from when you and I went to Salem. You can visit places that have been filmed and used in things because we did that ourselves between the Lords of Salem as well as, Hocus Pocus and stuff like that. These places can be found. And depending on the current owner's, you know, enjoyment, privacy, or whatever, they may or may not like that. So there is a certain amount of renovations that does take a little bit of the gusto away from that cool, spooky look it used to have. But the house in general, it's still there. It's still up. It completely has occupants, and it just doesn't quite have that horror sex appeal that people like yourself and myself would really dig.
Yeah, yeah. Well, apparently, I mean, I'm pretty sure I remember hearing this story. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I think my mother said at one time they actually did used to allow people into the house
Okay.
to go and visit. But then like things were happening apparently to people and something like that, so they had to like pull it for legal reasons. But like you said, I mean, other than what happened with the DeFeo family, which is the boy who in the beginning of this movie that you hear about, but it's also the subject of Amityville Horror 2, other than the him going and killing his family and the stuff that happened to Lutz family, nobody else has ever said anything else about this house. There's been any other previous owners have never said anything about anything happening in the house that was haunting. But then again, I'm like, why would you get rid of the house then if you? But who knows?
Right. So let's jump into the movie a little bit. It's directed by Stuart Rosenberg and stars, of course, James Brolin and Margot Kidder, who most people are going to know from whether it be Superman or Black Christmas. James Brolin at that time was also a very established actor too at the time, where movies like this don't tend to be pretty high up on a movie that you would actually see. Actually, part of the stuff I read about was that he actually had to take a pay cut to even do this movie, but set up an agreement to basically get paid on the back end based off how the movie did. And I read that he actually made subsequently about $17 million after this movie was released due to it being such a blockbuster hit for an independent film. And then if that was to happen nowadays, he would have made like 64 million by today's standards.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And like I said, a lot of times, like you saying, at that time he was considered like, a huge leading man. People might know the Brolin family. Obviously, his son was from Goonies, who also played Thanos in the Marvel movies. And then, like you said, everybody knows, mainly because of Lois Lane and the Superman movies and stuff like that. But like I said, horror fans, Black Christmas, obviously. But yeah, for a movie at a time in the 70s, especially because at that time in the 70s when horror movies were starting to come back out a little bit again, they were getting a little bit more luster. It wasn't lucrative for actors and actresses to try to get into these movies because a lot of times these horror movies were the downfall of a lot of people's careers.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard, to get somebody who was a big name to commit to a movie that is about this, especially a movie like this where you're making a movie based on a true story where it's pretty crazy. When we're gonna talk about this with the horror movie, it's kind of funny though because it's a movie that's got horrific things that happen, but it's interesting, and I want to know what your take is that the fact that there actually isn't nobody getting killed in this entire movie. other than the fact if you go to the flashbacks with the DeFeo family, other than that, yeah, there's absolutely no deaths in this movie at all on screen other than the past stuff.
Right. No, and that's really interesting. And I'll get into the details of this come the end of the episode when we're talking the end of the review when we're talking about the obituaries. But you're right, because the movie, it definitely has a bit of a slow burn feel to it. As it gets, past the 2 week mark of, the days that the Lutz family's in the house, to where there's more paranormal activity and things like that, is when it definitely it revs up a little bit more when it comes to that. But the first half of the movie is really just dominated of a family just kind of living their lives, kind of noticing things, casual.
You should watch the Vampire and Devil show, or I'll shit my pants.
The dramatic part of the movie, as it starts out, is actually what was happening to the priest, who they had asked to come in and basically bless the house based off suggestions made because of what happened with the DeFeo murders. And then the priest is, being kind of like attacked by like flies, very kind of plague style out of the Old Testament, and then starts getting these, these boils, these like wounds on his hands after being in the house. That's kind of the most dramatic part of the beginning part of the actual movie. But then it leads into a relatively slow burn of what just comes across for me more of like just a family kind of living their life, doing their thing. Kind of the history of the Lutz family is basically the husband and the wife. The wife is actually the one with the kids. They both have their own houses, but decide that when they get together and get married and start living their life, that they just want, their own place to call their own and have a fresh start. So that's how they settled on this property where, James Brolin's character is the stepdad to all the kids. But yeah, I found that the movie really had kind of like a slow burn to it until you get around, the 70-minute mark, the hour, or an hour and 20 kind of a thing, as it starts getting into its, its paranormal aspect.
Yeah.
Leading up until basically kind of the touch of madness. But it is very strange to have a movie that, by all accounts, you catalog as a horror movie with no kills, no deaths whatsoever.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like you said, in the first half of that movie, yeah, the only craziness is the spirit of the house attacking the priest. The him trying to get a hold of them on the phone, and they can't get connected. That's probably my favorite part of the whole entire movie, was when the priest is getting attacked, because I love the whole like get out, like the actual house is like telling him to get out of the house. And like even like when he's trying to go to the house, all of a sudden their car locks up, and it's all this craziness about like keeping the priest and keeping them out. But like yeah, other than that, other than like you said, little bits and pieces, like the little girl's got an imaginary friend and she's making her do stupid things, and there's a scene where the babysitter's stuck in a closet the whole entire time, and she's bleeding because she's trying to get out of this house, get out of this closet, and the little girl's like, well, Jody wouldn't let her out, and they're like, well, it's just an imaginary friend, but you find out it's not really an imaginary friend. But yeah, other than that, like the movie is basically just Brolin's character kind of, Mr. Lutz kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper into this madness, which I also like too, because like everybody's noticing it, that he's going crazy. The wife is like, maybe there's something like in the water or something. Are you sick? He goes to a bar, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, you kind of look like the guy who killed his family not that long ago. And he's like, they're all like, so it's kind of crazy that the madness that was in the house was kind of morphing him into like something, because there had been some kind of similar aspect to the DeFeo and the Lutz, kind of like how people were thinking like, hey, you kind of look like this guy.
Yeah. No, for sure. And that was kind of an interesting thing too, because of course, Mr. Lutz is like referring back to the closet scene, is like, dude, there's no locks on this door. Like, what do you mean you couldn't get out? Like, there's no way to lock this. It's a closet that you hang your clothes in. Like, there's no way to lock this door. And he's like, I was calling out to her and she wouldn't let me out. And the daughter's sitting there being like, well, of course I wouldn't let her out. I was told not to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that typical, imaginary friend, very common still to this day. I'm sure there's plenty of kids that always kind of have like that imaginary friend or just that character that they connect with and stuff like that. But that was kind of an interesting, concept behind that, because, there's other movies that have touched into that, and that's stuff that we'll jump into in a little bit. And then, yeah, it leads up to that, that madness mixed with curiosities, also along with accusations, because like, how would a person who lives in a murder house react to being told by a commoner or just a local resident, hey, yeah, you look like that dude who killed his whole family? And you're kind of like, what? I'm a family man, dude. I would never do such a thing. How could you even say that of me? But then, do you look at yourself in the mirror differently? If a shadow falls on your face and kind of gives it a certain look, does that wander through your head, or do you look at it nothing more than the shadow came across my face? The cat walked in front of the lamp or whatever.
Yeah. Like I said, yeah, it gets crazy, because like I said, you can get him into this. You start seeping into his madness, and he's messing around with an axe and sharpening up throughout the movie, and you're like, oh god, what's gonna happen? And like I said, it's like you can see that he's fighting against this urge to do something bad, and then he's like, man, I need to do something. But it's weird when you talk about these kind of movies where, okay, back in the day, kids, like, kids grew up and we had imaginary friends. People had imaginary friends, and it wasn't such a such a time where you could be like, oh, why this person? That was little kids that have imaginary friends. But it gets to a point when you start getting things and start seeing things and things start happening. It's like, I mean, the best part of it, even though it's not in this movie, but like another movie that's kind of a similar concept, is like Poltergeist, where you have like the little girl, they're like, oh, come check this out, and she keeps getting pushed around the kitchen. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if I'm in a house and that happens, I'm getting the fuck out before anything happens. I don't give a crap if it's a good spirit or a bad spirit. Shit like that happens, get the hell out of your house. And that's the same like with like this, like all the crazy stuff that was happening. It's like, how do you like I said, that's the only good thing about this. That's why I like about this movie was, in most movies you see the house is haunted, shit's happening to them, things are doing this, and it's months and months and months and months and months later, and these people are still living in the house. These guys lived in this house for 28 days and got the fuck out in 28 days. They're like, nope, they didn't even come back and get their shit. And I think I read it was like years later or months later that someone finally came and did get some of that stuff out. But yeah, they were like, yeah, we're not stepping foot in this house once ever again.
Right. And that's the thing. Yeah, I had read about that too, where they were talking about it. They were like, yeah, they it was like a moving company, like months later, like shipped their stuff like to them or something. And so it's like, okay, gotta get up and gotta go. Now there's an interesting thing I want to pose to you, because I found this kind of interesting as I was watching the movie, and the axe scenes triggered something in me, and I did a little bit of just release research on this. The thing that I found very interesting when I was watching the scene, sharpening the axe and then, contemplating killing his family, to subsequently not doing it and being like, guys, get up, let's go. If we don't leave now, something bad's going to happen, where you don't have him obviously admitting to being like, well, I've been having these thoughts of lopping off your head tonight. No, this can't be a thing. I got to get me and my family out of this situation. Is a year later, about 11 months later, because this movie came out in June of 79. In July, or sorry, 13 months later. And then in July of 1980, we got The Shining.
Yeah.
Which was obviously that same kind of seclusion, paranormal, but based around a character that basically did follow through with the acts. And while obviously not counting, the people that he tried to that tried to get involved, that were killed in that movie. The family itself, though, were not actually killed in the movie. And that's, with Jack Nicholson's character actually coming at, the whole family to kill them off.
Yeah.
Versus, like I said, of course, you had his killing of Scatman Carruthers' character. But I found that to be particularly interesting because I was like, when you have these movies based off books, which both of those movies were, I found it kind of interesting where the first movie went that way but didn't follow through, and then strangely enough, a year later, the second movie basically did.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy too. Yeah, and it's it's interesting, like the parallels of those two movies being, somewhat similar, family, man into madness, and an axe being used and stuff like that. I mean, it was, like I said, maybe it's just something more horrific about having an axe versus like a knife or a gun. Because, like I said, like in the beginning of the DeFeo ones, it was, he shot his family. So I think it would have been, I mean, not that shooting your family isn't bad, but I think killing your family with an axe is a little bit more personal, because when you're shooting somebody, you're shooting them kind of farther away versus like being up close and having to chop them up. But yeah, I thought it was interesting too. And I was like, and I posed this question for you too, because I know you're a huge fan of them, and I know you're a huge fan of like The Conjuring and movies like that. This was actually one of the movies that Ed and Lorraine, the real people from The Conjuring, were part of. What did you think about them? Because apparently I read something that like Lorraine really, really was like hardcore, like animated about this house really being as bad. She said it was like one of the worst houses and places that she's ever been in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love any kind of demonology stuff. And as far as modern movies, I'm very invested in the Conjuring universe, whether that be Curse of La Llorona, The Conjurings, Annabelle, and that also does take me into like movies like Insidious and stuff like that, which I really do love as well. But I do find Ed and Lorraine to be incredibly interesting people. I love the fact that these movies have been based off their life. And frankly, I also think The Conjuring is just one of those series that consistently is doing it well and right versus something like the Paranormal Activity movies, which as they continued on, you could clearly see it was just that much more of a struggle every single time. But The Conjuring has these consistent fresh takes between the Annabelle doll, the Crooked Man, the Nun. There's so much uniqueness to it. But yeah, I found that always to be incredibly interesting. Yeah, so The Conjuring 2 is based around Ed and Lorraine's experiences in the Amityville house, where Lorraine is very, very adamant about there is something here. This is a very possessed house. There is a lot of spiritual activity where, Ed gets those feelings as well, but he really has to react more off of what Lorraine's telling him about the feelings that she's getting and how to then move forward in their, whether they need to do exorcisms or whether they need to leave or what studies they need to do. But the thing I also find very, very interesting is the fact that the consistent history of the Amityville house outside, past Ed and Lorraine, is incredibly tame. And multiple occupants. And don't get me wrong, it's not like that house has had 8 to 10 families that have lived in there, because both of us have done our research on there. It's been like 3,
Yeah.
maybe 4, but like it's only really been about 3 families past the Lutz family that have bought, subsequently lived in there, and dominantly across the board, it's been we've had no activity, we've had no issues. This has just been a house to us, and then eventually we just decided that we needed a fresh start somewhere else, or just wanted to buy a house or here instead, or have since gotten a turn on our investment, whatever those various families have said. But I do love the fact that Lorraine and Ed got involved with the Amityville house. But I do find it very interesting. And unfortunately, you and I are not going to have the opportunities to get to talk to them because, of course, we want to build this show up to as high as we can get it to go. But unfortunately, Ed and Lorraine will not be on our lists of interviews when it comes to Vampire and Devil podcast. But no worries. So I like the fact that they were involved in actually checking out that house. And I do like the fact that that was chronicled in The Conjuring because they have so many experiences. And The Conjuring only has 3 movies, about to have 4, and it's the final movie as well. So there's a lot for them to base these movies off of as far as the history of Ed and Lorraine's back catalog. I like the fact that the Amityville house was memorialized or whatever in those movies. So I really dug on that for sure.
Oh yeah, and then obviously, like you said, this movie is very spawned. Very, I think there was like 4 or 5 sequels or something like that. It got to a ridiculous like amount of sequels this movie has had. But in my opinion, I mean, I'm going to ask you too. I mean, as far as Amityville 1 and Amityville 2, my opinion is Amityville 2 is the way better movie.
Yes.
I thought like I said, Amityville 2 goes back into the DeFeo time, and it shows you like how that house started with the beginning of Amityville 1. You see like the aftermath of that, because in the beginning of this movie, Amityville 1, it starts the cops coming and they're figuring out what's going on, and that was the DeFeo shooting his family. Where this one was, like I said, the first movie is a good movie. Like I said, I love it.
Yeah.
But I like the second one because the second one had the kills, had the creepiness, had that madness. It had Diana Franklin in it, who I love. So, but what do you feel the same way? Like, you think that as far as people always saying that sequels can't be better than originals, what do you think about that between the two and the first one?
No, 100%. I give credit where credit is due to the Amityville horror starting it off, because you can't have a series continue on, frankly, without a strong base. Yeah, you can completely fuck it up as you continue on, but you get the leverage to continue on based off the strength of the foundation. But the bottom line is, I do like the second one more, because not only does it get deeper into the real history of the Amityville house, it does have that horror aspect to it of real kills to it.
Yeah.
So I definitely do 100% agree with you. If we're comparing Amityville and Amityville 2, Amityville 2 gets the win if we're putting those two head to head. But that's also an excellent bridge into where we should go next, which is there's a lot of talk, controversy, he said, she said, they said, just outside of this movie. The pop culture history of this movie is almost more scary or damaging than the actual movie itself.
Oh yeah. 'Cause there's been, like I said, the young boy that was one of the. He came out with a documentary not that long ago. Like, it was called My Amityville Horror or something like that, and it basically talked about like his experiences, and a lot of people that didn't believe any of this stuff. There's a lot of there's it's very controversial as far as like everything going again with how figuring out like if it really happened. Obviously, there's no denying that the DeFeo thing happened. I
Yeah.
mean, that's proven. It's been trials for it, dead bodies, all that stuff. So there's no denying that something had happened in that house. But whether or not the stuff that happened with the Lutz family, some people believe that it was just a hoax. They were hurting for money because he bought this huge house and then couldn't do it. So it was about financials. And like I said, some people believe that. I mean, even the actors, I read that they don't believe that the story was true. But then, like I said, we're talking about, Ed and Lorraine is, whether or not you believe Lorraine and Ed and Lorraine were real, you know real people. Well, not real people, but like had real powers, like that kind of stuff, like that. Whether or not you believe the, spiritual stuff that they could do, a lot of people do. And like I said, Lorraine has talked about how this house has been one of the worst places that she's been in. So, yeah, like I said, it all really, I guess it depends on whether or not you believe in supernatural stuff or not. I mean, granted, yes, they're going to embellish a lot of the stuff for Hollywood. Some of the stuff that happened in this movie, that was based on real stuff. The people, there was controversy about the guy who wrote the book because he was just trying to make a buck.
I like watching the Vampire and Devil Show.
So
Well,
yeah,
because they also talked about how the lawyer who was the defense lawyer of DeFeo said the book's a fabrication because we were drunk.
Yeah.
Like I had conversations with the writer about this book based off me defending Mr. DeFeo, and he's like, after many bottles of wine is basically how this story happened, which is an interesting way. That's an interesting thing to read. That's an interesting thing to look at, where it's like, okay, you've got somebody who, not counting the actual person, as in Mr. DeFeo, who's going to be the closest person to it, basically saying, well, yeah, it's a movie based off of the deeds of my client, but we went into those upper layers of, poltergeist paranormal because we were fucking shit-faced. I mean,
Yeah.
It's interesting, dude. It's just kind of a weird thing. And people have also spoken out on the fact that that's exactly why you don't use a lawyer as like a ghost writer kind of a thing, is because it's so difficult to differentiate fact from fiction, from actual law-proved reality.
Yeah. It's just like I said, it's just a crazy story, and like I said, it's one of those ones where it continues on. A couple of years, I don't remember what year, but they did a remake for the Amityville Horror that had Ryan Reynolds in it.
2005.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I liked it. I mean, like I said, I'm usually a sucker for the original ones, but I thought they did a pretty good version of it. Like I said, it still didn't beat the original, but I liked it. I thought it was, well, as far as remakes go, is one of the better ones.
Yeah, definitely. The only thing that kind of killed me about the remake part is the remake movie is the endings didn't match. And I don't mean they have to match like scene for scene, phrase for phrase, action for action, but they weren't the same at all.
Yeah.
It was a completely different direction. And we may talk about that more in depth in the future when we get into remake episodes and stuff like that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I do prefer, if you're gonna remake, not so much do a retelling, but if you're doing a traditional remake, you got to keep the end the same, or at least, consistent. That was also something that I found very interesting from our previous episode when we were talking about My Bloody Valentine, because we were reviewing the original. we didn't talk as much about the remake, but the ending was the same of the remake versus the original. However, the characters they used as the villain of the remake was flipped from the original, which I didn't love, because I was like, okay, yeah, you stuck to the script, as the saying goes, as far as matching the concept of the original, but this character you flipped for that character in the remake, which I'm like, no, that's not a thing you do. But anyway, getting back on point. So I definitely think that Ryan's version was solid, yes, but I didn't love the fact that the ending went in a completely different direction, because just in my opinion, when it comes to basically kind of the unwritten rule of remakes, you can't do that.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, you gotta. I mean, if you're gonna change things that much, you might as well just made a new movie.
Yeah.
You might as well just made a sequel.
And it's
like
crazy because like ourselves, because I took a look, fans that get curious from our episode that will go and look, I mean, on the Wikipedia alone for the Amityville horror movie is literally listed all the movies they've done up to present date, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's about the first 3 movies are basically that's the Amityville horror. But when you get to like movie 4 up to like movie 40, because that's kind of how it feels, that they're just paranormal movies that they're just using the word Amityville for.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And don't get me wrong, I've got the physical copies of practically all of those movies.
Yeah. So what is your overall take of the 1979 Amityville horror movie?
All right, yeah. So let's talk about the obituaries. For me, when it comes to how I rank it out of 10 kills, to be honest, I give it a 7. That's my comfort zone for this particular movie. And like I said, and like we discussed, the coolest part of the movie was in the first 10 minutes. Then it had that slow burn, which wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not shitting on it at all for a slow burn style of movie. It's not, oh my God, vampire wants nothing but a bloodlust, and that's why he didn't get his kills. He didn't get his murders. That's why he's ripping on it. No, I'm not ripping on it at all. But the design, factually, in my opinion, and I think the movie proves that, is a slow burn movie into that paranormal feel. You get into the, am I going to murder my family? Nah, man, I'm stronger than that. Let me get them out of this situation. I like the concept of the movie. I think it's very well done. I love James's portrayal. I think that Margot's is fantastic as well. I just think the overall build of the movie is a little bit overall too casual of a movie to get that higher type of rating. For me, it's just a solid above average rating. It's a good movie, a solid movie. I do rank the Ryan Reynolds movie lower because I do give that movie a 6, while it does have more of a scary feel, more of a bloodlusty feel to that. If we revisit remakes and discuss that movie, I'll break it down more. But I do rank the remake lower. But part of my ranking actually is the fact that its sequel is superior. That may or may not be fair, but that is how I feel on the situation. So it's just a solid 7 out of 10 for kills for me.
Yeah. For me, I'm gonna go with the 6. I'm a little bit lower, only because, like I said, yeah. I mean, I do give it high rankings because it is based on a true story. I do like that part. I mean, like I said, like you said, the beginning of the movie is great with them trying to get, the entity trying to get rid of the priest. And then it's slow and it's slow and it's slow and it's slow. Like I said, I mean, I get it. because unlike other poltergeisty kind of movies, the stuff that happened to the Lutz family is kind of tamer versus some other families who have gotten and other movies that are about. So you couldn't go completely crazy because then you're going to go overboard of stuff that happened to this family that didn't happen. But yeah, like I said, yeah, the fact that the fact that there's no dead bodies in this movie other than flashbacks, it could have been a little bit more violent. It definitely could have been a little bit more, this and that kind of stuff to it. But yeah, and like you said, I agree that the second movie is the better of the movie, which should not be.
Yes.
Sequels should. There are some movies that I personally believe sequels are better than the originals, but those are supposed to be very small and very few. And this is one of those ones that, yeah, the sequel is way superior than this entire movie than the original one. I think this. I mean, if I had to rate the second one versus this one, I'd give that second one probably an 8.5 versus like the 6. So that's why I give it a 6. Because like I said, it is a good movie, and it is a good movie just about something that's paranormal, and that beginning of those kind of movies when we're talking about paranormal movies, like the beginning of like the Exorcist movies and that kind of stuff. So it kind of was like the one of the original ones of being these movies now that, like you said, The Conjuring and all these kind of movies now, Paranormal Activity, they're popping out everywhere now. Every year you got 100 of movies that are paranormal movies. Where back in the 70s, it wasn't. It was very. They were. So I do give it a little bit of kudos because of its groundbreaking. But yeah,
Yes.
it's such a slow burn movie for me, and I love it. It's good acting. It's
Yeah.
good. I love the direction of it. I love the whole entire look of the movie. But yeah, for me, I want a little bit more action in my movie.
For sure. And it is also common knowledge too that movie was number one up until the 90s till it was finally displaced as the number one independent movie for 10, 11, 12 years. So it did amazing as an independent movie, kind of. And I'm not talking obviously about the style of movie or the graphicness of said movies, but it was basically the late 70s equivalent to current modern day Terrifier, where an independent movie just stopped traffic. But no, Devil, I'm definitely with you when it comes to that. So it's a 7 for me, it's a 6 for you, so that makes it a 6.5 on our official kills on the obituaries for the Amityville Horror. Do we agree on that? 6.5 for kills?
Yeah, I think a 6.5 is a good solid number for the Amityville 1979.
Absolutely, for sure. So we're going to leave it at that. We appreciate you ghouls, goblins, all of our spooks and creeps that tune in and check us out. We are very, very appreciative of you guys, and we're just going to keep making it creepier and a lot more fun. So we're going to call it a wrap on this edition when it comes to the Candyman 2021 and the Amityville Horror 1979. We will see you guys for our next episode, where we're going to debut our next letters of the alphabet, which will be B and C, as we also debut our showdown series of Vampire versus Devil. So stay tuned for that. We got a lot of great things coming your way, as well as all of those little skits and creepy and goofiness that you guys love all the same. We appreciate you guys. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you guys real soon. Signing off for Crazy White Devil and for myself, Salem Vampire. Horns up, fangs out. We will see you guys real soon. Take a bite out of each other.
Oh, that looks nice. Dinner is served. What's that foot? What's that foot? Redner! Redner, what are you doing over here?
Nothing.
Why are you hanging out? Nothing? What do you mean nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing, you say. Look at you. You're hanging out on the stove. You're all burnt up. You and Devil are spending way too much time together.
No.
Yes, you are.
No, we're not.
Okay, fine. Have it your way. But speaking of Devil, you guys need to tune in to the Vampire and Devil podcast for all you ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps. Make sure that you're checking out everything we've got coming up for you. And make sure you don't get all burnt up, just like Redner here.
No.
Horns up, fangs out.
This is the part of the show where we honor those who have passed. We honor these three. Screaming Jay Hawkins, he put a spell on you. The 1-year anniversary of Riku Browning's death, the creature from the Black Lagoon. And just recently we lost Carl Weathers, who was in the movie Predator. We honor these three, for those who have passed will not be forgotten.